Takashi Kunihiro. We talked about him a couple of weeks ago, and it's an interview from Kakaku magazine. And it's a 3-parter. We're going to talk about part 2 now, and part 2 continues his conversation about the development and design of movie toys. Again, Kunihiro, legendary designer from Takara and Hasbro, dating all the way back to 1982 when he first started working with them, worked on some of the most iconic toys in Transformer history. But here today, he's going to talk about the evolution of some more movie toys, specifically that of the Studio Series Blackout that he recently worked on, and the Studio Series Megatron, and how it compares and contrasts to the originals. And what was one thing that he mentioned that was really interesting was that he went back, because when they originally designed the old movie Blackout toy, specifically the Voyager, they had very little to work on based on, like, you know, they were designing the toy just based on CG models. They were early CG models and stuff like that. And they said that when they finally, you know, designed the toy, it's released and everything, then they finally went to go see the movie in theaters. Like they went, and then they said that as they were watching the movie, they realized, oh wow, Blackout's transformation is a lot simpler than we made the toy out to be.
Yeah.
And we miss, like, because his obsession is really trying to recreate the transformation on screen to match that which the toy could do, or vice versa. And so obviously, again, they were working kind of blindly. And so they realized, like, the toy that they put out there. And it's one thing that he actually failed to mention here in this interview, but I remember reading somewhere else, was that Blackout in the early stages of his development was rumored to be Soundwave. And one aspect of the original Voyager toy, if you actually look at it, is he kind of has like a sound like speaker above his head. Right. And it doesn't do anything. And again, the whole thing where he could, you know, eject a character, in the case Scorponok and stuff. Like, there was a lot, again, that's like a piece of him that was lost in the development. But so again, that was also something that when they started, you know, working on the toy, and then they left that in, but now when they revisit the character now for Studio Series, like, it's stuff, you know, molded details of those old designs and concepts are now absent in this Studio Series one, thankfully. And they said, like, you know, now revisiting it, watching, you know, the 2007 movie hundreds of times, they're like, yeah, it's an easier design. It transforms a lot easier in the movie, so we're going to transition that. And they're very happy with how it turned out. And they realized that they ended up making a more complicated toy than it actually needed to be for that scale. So it's pretty cool, you know, to mention that. And he actually has some photos, some side-by-side photos and stuff. So we'll post those photos from his interview and stuff of comparing things. Another one that he mentioned was specifically Megatron from Revenge of the Fallen. And again, another one where he's like, when we were designing it, we had absolutely no idea what his feet looked like. So we designed the original Voyager Revenge of the Fallen Megatron, not even knowing what his feet looked like. Like, we just, again, just blindly designing it, you know, hoping like, okay, maybe it'll be like this, maybe it'll be like that. And again, it going absolutely nowhere. And then, of course, he also he apologizes here for the Voyager toy that it had like a big empty torso gap that you could see from the side. Like, just, it wasn't, he pretty much admits that it wasn't a good toy. Primarily because they were designing it without even knowing how it was supposed to look. And then again, seeing the movie and going, oh, that's what his feet look like. That's what this looks like. And now the Studio Series being, you know, the answer to that. And again, he has a really good image here of the Studio Series one next to, I think it was the Platinum release in Japan version, because ours we got was even more ugly. It came in like a green, I used to call it the turtle tank, because it was a green tank, the Voyager. Yeah. So he has some really nice photos here comparing, like, you know, the before and after. So really interesting interview talking about that too. And then he goes on just to mention, you know, like the other toys that he had difficulty with, like Jazz, because of his size, and how they were trying to do, you know, they wanted to scale things as best as possible, but because of the size, there's only so much you have to work with. So you had these weird hinge hands that the original Jazz had and stuff like that. Like, it was, anyone who owns that original 2007 Deluxe Jazz, like, he doesn't really have arms, but he doesn't really have hands either. It's just like they're just folding kibble and just going, yep, that's an arm. Like, again, super
sad about that toy.
Yeah, and not to mention, like, he doesn't mention it here, but there was a lot, like, like, didn't really have a gun at first, then he came with a gun, then he came with like some kind of telescopy thing, like like the different versions, like it was truly a evolutionary progress working with the movie stuff. And I mean, there's more in this interview too that's worth mentioning, but I'll definitely link it because it's a good read. And this is just part 2 of 3. We're going to talk about part 3 also, which is another interesting read. But that's just kind of the cliff notes of some of the cool things in it. There's also some photos again of him with certain toys and comparing this and that and seeing the evolution of the movie designs and how, like, I mean, I was a guy that went all in and I posted it on
I laugh at you so hard for that.
I posted on my Instagram recently. I have, like, no joke, it's a 16-foot long shelving of every movie toy from 2007 to 2013, 14-ish.
I told you to get out, and you didn't. You didn't want to. You're like, no, I got to do this. And I'm like, you don't have to. Don't do it.
And it was nuts. And I got, like, everything. And it's like now, all it is now, if anything, it's almost like
a reminder.
It's a reminders of the mistakes of the past and how, like, how one could truly not get the best toy on the first go, so to speak. And I think even the classics shelving in a lot of ways is that too. Anyone who picked up most classics toys and going like, oh, I'm going to get this, classics Wheeljack, or, and this is going to be the Wheeljack. And then the masterpiece comes out.
No, I usually like getting different iterations to see how they change over the years.
Those ones.
And that's one thing I kind of liked about the article too, where I think he really liked getting a second shot at doing some redesigns after getting the CGI models now, the actual CGI models.
Well, especially
and seeing how everything transforms.
Yeah, watching it seems to be their big thing. It's like we didn't even get to watch the movie, and they say that's the thing that would make them the most depressed is they would watch the movie and go, oh, we didn't design it like that at all.
Yeah.
Especially, again, the Blackout one is just funny. It's like, yeah, he's actually a lot easier than we made him out to be, which is hilarious now in hindsight.
And one thing I do like is that they're kind of paying attention. The whole point of the studio series is to pay attention to the scale and kind of keep everything to scale kind of thing. So I know he kind of laments his limitations with Jazz, and even I do too. I'm like, oh well, like you don't want to, if you make Jazz a Voyager, then all of a sudden he's as big as Blackout, and that's not even accurate. You know? So I mean, I get that they're trying, but that's the challenge and that's the limitations that they put on themselves for that kind of stuff. But I hope those notes and those ideas are kept for maybe masterpiece versions of those movie designs. That's what I'm hoping.
Well, I think, and especially when it comes to the movie cast, if you look at the current choices that are being used for masterpiece movie cast, it's all 2007 characters. Mm-hmm. So I think Jazz is a shoo-in, really. I mean, either him or Ratchet at this point. Yeah. So it's definitely going to happen sooner or later.